Hello, folks. So we're doing office hours. If you haven't done office hours before, then you're in for a real treat. It's going to be fun. So basically what office hours is all about, and I can share my screen here, is um, yeah, twice a week, I give an hour of my time to answer any questions that anybody has. And if you think that sounds like really generous and nice of me, um, I kind of think it's nice, but basically it's kind of selfish. So I get questions like all the time from people. And if I just stopped and answered all the questions, I'd never get anything done. And eventually I wouldn't be able to answer the questions because I wouldn't have the experience to do so. So it's a little bit selfish so that I can just say, hey, why don't you ask during office hours? And then I can get things done, and then I can dedicate an hour to answer questions. So the way that this works is the people who are on the Zoom call get priority. So yeah, those on the Zoom call can ask questions. And then if we run out of questions and people on the Zoom call just want to lurk, that's totally cool. And I'll go to the Discord, which you should be able to find in the description of this video. But we have this channel called Office Hours that is where a bunch of people will paste questions as we go throughout the week. And yeah, that's basically it. So anybody have any questions for me right now before I look at the Discord? Oh, and in the Zoom, there is a chat feature, but I prefer um, to have questions come. Oh, thanks, Neil. That was nice. You just given a link. That's helpful. Cool. Any Raphael, do you have any questions? You good? I'll just assume if you don't unmute yourself and say that you do, then I'll assume you don't. So, okay, cool. So with that, I will just go right here. Let's see where we left off from last time. I don't know if I think I may see. Okay, so this is where I was chatting. And great. Okay, here we go. We've got a question from Nick. What's up, Ricardo? So our question from Nick on Epic React. Use effect, HTTP request, extra credit solution number 3. So let's pull this up so we're all looking at the same thing. So this is going to be the React hooks workshop. Let me pull that up here real quick. And extra credit 3 on the use effect. I think it's this one right here. Here we are. Excellent. And we'll get things running. So Nick is wondering, oh, thanks a lot. The solution states a way to that removes keys, removes Pokemon in error. Yep. If we wanted to maintain those keys, then we do, yeah, I remember this question. You'd spread the state, but because of exhaustive depths, we can't do that because then we'd have to have the state in the dependency array, which will endlessly loop forever. So let's show the problem here first. Let me go to our HTTP requests. This is going to be extra credit 3. Open that on an isolated page. And yeah, I guess, I don't know. Maybe I don't need this open right now. Anyway, so yeah, the suggested idea is like, what if I wanted to maintain the state of the Pokemon and the error? Because, right, I need to get my tool to tighten this up because the microphone keeps falling down on my keyboard. I need it to be like right there, but it just keeps falling. Man, that is super annoying. Hopefully Zoom can compensate for the distance that microphone is from my face. So we wanted to preserve the Pokemon and error anytime we make this state update. So really, once we get to the to this point, we're probably better off to just go with a use reducer. And so like this question makes sense. And the reason I want to address this question is because there are a couple of tips that I can give you as we go through this. But at this point, you really probably should be using use reducer. And this exercise actually tees you up for the advanced workshop or advanced hooks workshop. That's kind of its whole purpose as we continue through some of these extra credits, is just to get you ready, like, oh, well, what about this? What about that? What about that? And oh, maybe it would make more sense to just use reducer. But anyway, if we wanted to do that, then we're going to say ... state to spread all the state. And actually, we do it on the other side. so that we don't override the new state that we're trying to set. So now we're combining the existing state with the new state updates that we want to make, and that way we're not clearing out the Pokemon or the error. We do the same thing here and the same thing here. So like presumably there are good reasons to do this. You're just like, I want to update this part of the state, but not the whole thing. But now we're getting a warning right here saying, hey, you need to include the state in your dependency array. And there's a good reason for this. Because this is asynchronous, you could easily wind up with a stale closure where the state that we're spreading right here is actually old state and not the latest version of state. So trying to think of the order of things I want to demonstrate. The first thing, I guess, it's hard to demonstrate the bug that will come from here, so I'm not going to try. But believe me, there is a bug that would come where if the user chooses one Pokemon and then another rapidly before this other finishes, then we could end up in a situation where we have some stale state, which would not be a good situation. The reason that this would be hard to demonstrate is because then I'd have to display everything, like all of the state, and I don't want to belabor that. And there are plenty of questions. So if we're following the advice from the plugin, though, we fill in that state here, we hit save, and now we're going to be in a bit of a bind here because it'll just go forever. And I have installed in this project a thing that I made called Stop Runaway React Effects, which is, I actually created this for my workshops because I knew that as people were going through this very exercise, that they would run into a problem like this. And so I made a open source library to use in my workshops. So it's kind of fancy how it works. I'll just show you really briefly what is going on here. So when we're in production, then we don't do anything, but otherwise we have this function hijack effects that basically calls this hijack effect hook. And if we come up here, hijacked effect hook will get the original hook, and then it will get a special function, the hijacked effect hook, and override the React use effect or React use layout effect. Yeah, that's basically what it does. It just is hijacking React.use effect and React.use layout effect. And it uses some refs and a bunch of other things to make that all work. It's kind of cool what it is doing, and it protects us from hitting an API a million times. So that's nice. And it'll show you, hey, this is the callback that was invoked 60 times in 1 second. So it's probably a runaway effect. You probably want to figure out what's going on. And if we look at the dependencies, this is the last 60 times that this was called. Then you'll see we have the status of idle, and then status of pending, and then status of pending, and it's still pending. So it doesn't look like anything's actually changed, but it has, because it's because every time we call set state with this object, we are passing it a brand new object. So that triggers a re-render and says, okay, the state is now a new object. It's the one that we created right here. That will trigger a use effect callback or a use effect change because the state is a new object. So it comes back in here and says, oh, the state's a new object. So let me call set state again and create a new object, and it just keeps on going forever. And that's what happens. We call it 60 times in 1 second. It's like, oh, that's probably runaway effect. So that's the problem that Nick is bringing up about this. Is like, hey, I can't put the state in there because it's a brand new object every time. And so the solution for this is to ignore the rule, which you totally can do. It's like a thing that can happen. And sometimes, very rarely. In fact, I was writing a blog post about a legit situation where you should do this. And then I later realized that it was not a legit situation. So like it's hard to identify these problems or the places where this makes sense. But yeah, we could do this. We would just wind up with some stale state, which would probably, that's definitely bugs. Like pretty much every time you do this, you're creating bugs. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to make bugs. And so what we're going to do instead is we're not going to do this, and we're actually going to say we're going to use a feature, a little known feature of set state, which is, I've got a blog post for it, blog, lazy initialization, maybe? Yeah. So this blog post will talk a little bit about what I'm doing right here, which is using, oh wait, you know what? Yeah, and function updates. It's the function updates part of that we're going to talk about here. And that is when you call set state, you can actually call it with the new state value, or you can call it with a function that returns the new state value. Okay, so there. And what this function, like that doesn't look very useful by itself, but what the function does is it actually is going to be called with the current value. So here's our current state. Okay, whatever that current state is. And so then we could combine those. And now instead of using the state that we're getting from this, from the fact that we have that accessible in our closure, instead of using that, we can use what we get right here. And so React can give us what the current state is at the time that it runs this state updater function. The benefit of doing things this way is that means it's impossible for this to become a stale value because React is giving it to us. It's giving us the latest value. And so we can do that right here. And then we'll spread the current state right there and current state right here. And with that, we're going to avoid the bug and we avoid the forever render thing here. And actually, I wish this was a little bit easier to demonstrate, but here, we'll just log it with our state. And here we are, we'll clear all this out. And you'll see our initial state just has the idle, error null, its Pokemon is null. Then we go to Pikachu, and now we're pending, and now we're resolved, and now we have the Pokemon. Now, if I go to Charizard, you'll notice that before we would just clear out all of the state and we'd say the status is now pending. Now we're merging all of the state. And so during our pending right here, we're going to get our error is still null, but the Pokemon still exists in the state while we're pending. So that could be useful if you decided that you wanted to like display the Pokemon until the new state comes in, which actually we do in the suspense workshop. Yeah, so that's something, or that's how you would accomplish that sort of thing. But again, you're really like, at this point, you're probably better off to just use a reducer instead. But this is totally something you could do. And for some reason, I feel like, no, we never end up doing that, things that way. But yeah, I feel like, I think that was everything that I wanted to share about that. If anybody on the call has further questions about this, I'm happy to field those before moving on. And this is exactly what Chris suggested. So there you go. And again, switching to use reducer makes sense. Very good. And yes, on my last office hours, I was like, oh my goodness, Apollo is enormous. Something feels wrong. Yes, something was wrong. It's Apollo client is what you ship, which is still enormous and still bigger than React DOM because it is based on GraphQL, which by itself is bigger than React DOM. So yeah, that's a thing. Okay, cool. Yeah, a way to get all the elaborate on what you learned stuff. So yeah, that, and I answered this, but I'll just answer it for everybody watching now. So for each one of the workshops or each exercise, there's this elaboration and feedback form that pops open here, and you can elaborate on what you learn. That's really important in your learning and retention. And so the question was, how do I get these responses? I want to have them. And I think that's a great thing. You should want to have them. There's no system in place for that. So you can just email me and I will manually send it. But eventually we're actually going to build this in to Epic React. So you just do it directly in Epic React. So look forward to that. That'll be great. And then you'll be able to have access to all of that stuff. It'll be way better. And we'll have quizzes and different things like that too to test your knowledge. So you're going to love that. It's going to be great. Okay, cool. And I think we talked about this. Let me double check. Yep. Okay, good. And we answered that. Okay, Richard just asked this morning. Very good. Testing library question. how do I test that an async action was called? So let's get that example up. That makes things much easier. And I will just fork it right away. Easily test that clicking buttons A and C add remove a message asynchronously from the DOM with wait for element to be removed. But I'd like a way to test that clicking B doesn't remove anything from the DOM. If I just test that, the message still appears after clicking button B. It will pass even when line E is removed because it hides asynchronously. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So this one, this is definitely one of those interesting challenges. So let's make sure that we're all on the same page here. And I'm actually going to copy this. We're going to, since I've got a project open, example.js. Here we go. Paste that in here, and we'll just run this test. Okay, cool. And we don't need styles. Who needs styles for this test? We don't. All right, so we're going to have a test here that is, app example. And we will render with the React testing library. So render from testing library React. And let's grab user event from testing library user event. And I think that's probably all we need. Okay, so render our app. And you want screen, of course. Screen debug. Okay, cool. So this is what we're looking at. We have a button. Hold on a second. Okay, so when you click on this, okay, so clicking on B does nothing, and we want to make sure that, that clicking on each one of these. So let's just test each one of these. So we'll say screen dot get by role button with the name button A, and we'll say user event click. And then we will wait for the element to be removed, which is our hello from button A. So let's bring in wait for element to be removed. And this is going to need to be async. And then we will wait for element to be removed. And this is going to be screen get by role. Or actually, this will just be text, because that's a generic role for that one. Get by text. Okay, this says display none. So it's controlling the display, which is still going to appear in the DOM, and so get by text will still be able to find it. So we're not going to use this. Let's use wait for, and then screen get by text hello from button A to have style. I don't know why that's not auto-completing, but there we go. And display block. Let's try that. That's going to time out. Yeah, to have style, expect. Yeah, whoops, expect. There we go. That's why it wasn't auto-completing. Yep, there we go. Okay, good. Sweet. So we click on that, and then here, let's just do this really quick. So before, we want it to have display none. And same thing for button C, should have display none. And then we click A, and that will now be display block. We can do the same thing with C, and C, and C. And this should pass. There we go. Okay, good. So first of all, I'll mention one thing. For our contrived example, we're using set timeout. Anytime you're going to use set timeout in a test, you probably should be using fake timers. I'm assuming that this is not a set timeout in the real world, you're probably doing something asynchronous, making a request or something. And in that situation, you're going to be mocking out that request, probably using MSW, as I suggest that you do. And if you're doing that, then it will happen really quickly. There's no reason to use fake timers. So given that, if we really want to simulate what a more real world scenario would be like when you're testing this sort of thing, then instead of doing a set timeout with a certain amount of time, we'll just do a set timeout. And all that this is going to, with a 0, and all this will do is just put it on the next tick of the event loop. It will make no difference other than making our test run faster. Yeah, so now it's like a third of the time. So that's the only change I'm going to make here. It's irrelevant the length of time. If you really are doing a set timeout, then use fake timers. Otherwise, you're going to be making an HTTP request, which will be mocked, and that will basically be a set timeout of 0. Just putting things on the next tick of the event loop. Okay, anyway, so the problem that we're talking about here is how do I test this logic right here? Because we are waiting for something to happen, for things to no longer be in the DOM, or for the styles. Basically, with the other two, we're waiting for the styles to change. With this one, we're waiting for nothing to happen. That is what makes this so tricky. So presumably, if the logic is like this, then you're going to be making an HTTP request, and you can make an assertion to say that HTTP request was never made. That would probably be the best way to do that. So this may be a little bit more contrived than is useful. But let's just assume that you really are doing a set timeout. Maybe, and if you are, again, you should use fake timers. But in any case, well, yeah, so that actually, that makes it tricky too. So because it's contrived, I'm not sure I can give you the answer that you're looking for, Richard. I don't know if you're in here. Yeah, it doesn't look like you're here. But Richard, yeah, it's maybe a little bit too contrived, but I'll show you how to solve this problem, and maybe it will reveal to you how to solve your problem. So if this were the way that things were working, and we couldn't just say the HTTP request wasn't made, or accelerate the timeout and nothing changed, we can actually, this is one situation where it would make sense to just advance or like wait for the next tick of the event loop, and then make your assertion. So again, this is probably, like, I don't recommend doing this in real scenarios. I need to see an actual real world scenario to give you some more specific advice. But if this was your real world scenario for some reason, then this is how I would do it. So I would say, let's click on the button. So here, let's do click B. So click on button B. And then we're going to wait for, actually, no, that won't work because it checks synchronously. So, and I actually tried that recently. So what we need to do instead, see, I don't do this very often. I don't recommend doing this. We're going to await a new promise that takes resolve, and then set timeout resolve. And we can just do it for 10 milliseconds. It really doesn't make a difference. It'd probably be fine on 0 milliseconds, but this is one of those weird things. So we're going to say 10. Again, probably using fake timers. And then this would just amount to advance the timer and make sure nothing happened. But for our case, we're going to say wait for 10 milliseconds, and then we'll make this assertion. Actually, we want to make that assertion up here. Right, this is what it is, display, show, yeah. So it should be display block here, and then it should remain display block right there, and that should pass. It does not. Let's find out what's going on. Style C, oh, that's weird. Oh, yeah, right here, B. So what the devil did I, oh, right here also. There you go. Okay, now it passes. Good. So, so yeah, basically, I'll tell you the 3 different situations I think that you might be in. One, you're not actually doing set timeout. You're actually making an HTTP request of some kind, or any really, yeah, probably HTTP request. That should be mocked using MSW. And I've got a blog post about this. Oh, it looks like Richard is typing. So I'll go check out what he's typing here in just a second. But the blog post is stop mocking fetch. And so that's how I show you how you should be mocking HTTP requests. But if you're doing that, then it should actually be pretty straightforward. You just assert that the HTTP request was never called, like that no request was made. And that should hopefully be pretty straightforward. But that's what you would assert. Just make sure no request is made there. And then after that, then you just make sure that nothing changed in the DOM either. So you just make those two assertions, you should be fine. Now, if there's some weird asynchrony going on between you and making that request, then that might be a situation where you do want to just wait for the next tick of the event loop. Yeah, it's tricky when you're testing things that you're like, I don't want this to happen. This should not, or when you want to assert that nothing happens, because like, how long do you wait to make sure that nothing happens? And so in those situations, that may be a good place to do an arbitrary wait for a certain amount of time before checking that nothing happens. Typically not a great idea, but this might be a good situation for that. Alternatively, if you are doing a set timeout, then use fake timers. And what you do is say just advance timers by time, advance it by however many milliseconds, and then you can assert that nothing changed. And then and you're off to the races there. And then finally, if it really is something like this, then you're just stuck with wait for 10 milliseconds. Avoid doing this if you can. Okay. Yeah, good. So that's that. Let's see what Richard was saying here. In the real example, I'm using Material UI package, and it's asynchronously showing hiding using the collapse component. Couldn't mock out the UI component, but I was wondering if there's another way. Okay, so that's interesting. My guess is the reason that it's asynchronously showing and hiding is because there's some animation at play. And with animations, that's typically where I actually do mock things because I don't want to wait for the animation. And often the animation is more than 100 milliseconds. It's going to be something like 300 milliseconds maybe. And so in those situations, React Transition Group actually has a global configuration option to enable you to switch off animations globally. And I think Material UI, I don't know if it has something like that, but it might. I happen to know that the maintainer of Material UI is also a maintainer on React Testing Library. So he's very testing minded, and you might just look around and see what the recommended strategy for testing this sort of thing is. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you're using something like Material UI, well, no, that's totally separate thing. Never mind. Yeah, so I would just check out what Material UI has to offer you in regard to just disabling animations so that you don't have to wait for anything in your tests. There was something else I was going to say about that. Or like, I'm not sure how they're doing their animations, but maybe they're using timeouts. And if they are, then you can use fake timers. So yeah, hopefully that was interesting and useful for you. So good. I think that's as much as I'm going to put into that. So let me just copy all of this. I'll paste it right here. Oh man. Upload. There you go. But I added a comment. Okay, fine. We'll just do, I'm like barely over the limit. So we'll get rid of the quick C. That'll probably do it for me. Whoops. I don't think you need that. There you go. Bum-ba-da-dum. Okay, cool. So I think this may have been a relevant. How do you manage that line through imported modules in VS Code? That actually happens because it's deprecated. So you add the @deprecated flag to it in your TypeScript definitions right there. And VS Code will do that automatically these days. That's a pretty recent feature. It's awesome. Okay, cool. So that was fun. Thanks for the questions there. let me come back up here. Sweet, congratulations, Hayato. Exercise 2 on use effects. So cool, we were just right there. Every application eventually needs to do something in the outside world. Oh yeah, I remember seeing this question earlier. So why do we want to avoid side effects operation in a component? Yeah, so the reason that you want to avoid the side effects within the component, so here, let's do extra credit 2. Yeah, so like the question is, why don't we just put this right there? Why do we need use effect? So the reason for that, there are a couple of reasons. So one reason is that React can actually call your function, but not render your component. Another reason, and so that could result in a making a network request when you actually shouldn't, didn't need to, because you don't want to actually perform your side effects until the DOM has actually been updated, until React has actually said, okay, this thing does need to render, it should be committed to the DOM. Another reason for that is, I lost it. What was it? Oh, right. Doing a bunch of work inside of your component here will block rendering. And so if you just put all of your side effects within render, then you could end up with a situation where your React is trying to render all of your components, but it has to run all of your code as it does that, and that can make your application slow and sluggish. So between those two, that's the main reason. And in the not near future, but in the future, the impact of having side effects run during render will be significant, and you will not want to be in that place when that happens. I'm talking about concurrent mode. So you really want to just put side effects in a use effect. So that's why. Before use effect was available to use in React, what was the appropriate place and way to do side effect operations? Redux action dispatch? No. So Redux was not the appropriate way to do this. It is just a totally separate thing from React. React has a built-in mechanism. It's always had a built-in mechanism for side effects. And before use effects, we had class component lifecycles. And so you'd have component did mount, and you'd fire off a request there. Component did update, you'd fire off a request if the prop changed that, like for example, actually, we've got an example of this right here. No, dang it. I thought that I had an example of this same component as a class, but I guess I didn't, which is unfortunate. But yeah, so we had lifecycle methods, component did mount, component did update, that would handle those for us. And I showed that in this one. But yeah, we don't use classes anymore, so it doesn't matter. In the final code that is attached to this post, this code, you're accessing data in local storage and pass it to use data argument. Isn't accessing local storage by get item method inside effect operation as well? Why is it okay to do that in the component? Great question. So this is exercise 2 right here. So and actually what you're showing me here is exercise 2 extra credit 2. So that's with the function form. So if you watch the videos, then you'll see me. And actually, I think even in the background information, I explain this. Yeah, right here where I talk about lazy state initialization. I talk about how we're reading local storage in every single run of our component. And this is a bottleneck because reading from local storage can be quite slow. So it's better to not do that and instead to add a function to use the lazy function initialization. And I posted a blog post about that just a little bit ago, so you can check that out. Yeah, so what you are saying is accessing local storage during render is actually not. What I'm doing here is I'm creating a function that when called will access local storage, but React is responsible for calling that. So we don't need to worry about accessing local storage within our render function. We're not doing that. we are letting React access local storage for us by calling this function. So that's an important distinction, and that's what I talk about in the course of the workshop. So in the first exercise, we do it this way just because it's the easiest, and then I show you how we can optimize this as going forward. So yeah, so that's the answer to that question. If it's okay to access local storage in a callback function that can be passed to useState method, can I also fetch data from web API, set the response to state? Another great question. So for the difference between what we're doing here and doing a callback function for like a asynchronous thing, well, the difference is this is synchronous, and making an HTTP request is asynchronous. And so useState, the contract or the API around useState is you pass the value or you pass a function that will synchronously get me the value. If you need to do something asynchronous, then you're going to need to do what we're doing in exercise 6, which is handling all of that in a use effect. So, and then taking it a step further, you can write an abstraction around asynchronous things, and then eventually you just use React Query for most of that stuff. So yeah, great questions. Thanks for asking. Let me just jump down here to see if there are any relevant questions to what I just answered. Okay, very good. So let's come back up right here. So Ashraf, it's hard to inspect the DOM using screen debug, especially if I'm doing integration testing to a large component. Yes, I agree. Is there an easier way to inspect the DOM in another terminal while running my tests, or maybe in the browser if possible? Yeah, so actually we're sort of working on something to improve this, kind of, in an interesting way. So let's see, it's testing library. I think it's in DOM testing library. We've got I just opened this issue a little bit ago. It's called Open Testing Playground. And what this will do is it takes the DOM and it opens it up in the testing playground, which is phenomenal. It is so great. And in fact, there's even a new version available. So that's cool. So basically, you put your DOM output in here, not your JSX, that's different. Put your DOM output, your HTML right in here. It will render that on the right. And then as you interact with this, it will update this thing on the left to show you how to get that specific element and stuff. It's really cool. I think that, yeah, give that a shot. So yes, with a big integration test, that can be tricky. So what you might do is if I were integration testing the bookshelf list page or something, then I just come over here. I'd say right click on this and copy outer HTML. And then I'd bring it over here and paste it in there, and boom, there it is. I mean, it doesn't have my styles, but I'm not testing styles here. If you want to do like styles testing, then what you want is Cypress, not React testing library. But anyway, now that I have this in here, I can just say, okay, I want to get the author title, and here get by text, stick in the author, or I want to get the title, the heading. Okay, so get by role, heading, and then the title of the book. And so, yeah, that's kind of like if you're by debug, you're saying, okay, I don't know how to find what I'm looking for, then testing playground is where you want to go. It's awesome. Phenomenally good. So yeah, hopefully that is helpful to you. Yeah, and if you wanted to, yeah, I think that answers your question. Hey, happy Canadian Thanksgiving to you, Freddie. How do you recommend testing design system? Sorry, sometimes I read it out loud, and other times I know that if I try to read it out loud, I won't be able to comprehend it as I read, so I'm just going to read this. Okay, great. So this is these are good questions. Sorry, I'm a slow reader. So my thoughts around testing with Storybook. So you've got a design system component library implementation, and you're putting things in Storybook. I would consider Storybook kind of orthogonal. That's a good TC39 word, kind of like unrelated to what you're trying to accomplish here with just testing in general. So you've got a component library that you want to test. Yes, I would consider these component tests. It's hard to call a component test a unit test, because if you're rendering it to the DOM, then is it really a unit test, or is it like a unit test would be you mock all dependencies, right? All of those lines are fuzzy, and I actually don't care about those lines. What I care about is confidence. And so, yeah, with a component library, what I would suggest is most of your tests should probably just be in component test specific for each individual component. And then you can use Storybook. I would use Cypress, and I have in the past. I don't know if Downshift is still tested like that. Let me just see really quick. We did have a Storybook, and here's our Cypress test right here. Yeah, I guess I wrote this one. And this just pulls up our, didn't I have like a visit example or something? No, I guess not. Maybe things got changed, but yeah, so I used to, with Downshift, I used to have a Storybook page, and I would use Cypress to go to the Storybook page, and I'd interact with the stories. That worked out quite nicely. I was pretty happy with that. It was nice because there are some things that Downshift does that aren't reasonably tested with Jest, like positioning of the popover and different things like that. But yeah, in general, I would probably just use Jest to test most of your components. And then end-to-end testing is with component library is basically what I was doing with Cypress and Storybook. You could do the same. Chromatic basically solves the next question. So I personally am a big fan of, well, so first let me say, I have used visual regression testing tools, but the last time was quite some time ago. So the latest and greatest visual regression testing tools I've just seen demos of, and I'm impressed by them. And the one I'm most impressed by is Applitools. However, Chromatic is like built in with Storybook. Actually, Applitools has Storybook integration, I believe. But anyway, if Chromatic looks interesting to you, then I would suggest looking into it, because it will give you a lot of bang for your buck with visual regression testing. I would not recommend using snapshots. I have a blog post about that, snapshot testing. So you can take a look at that if you want. But yeah, in general, I'm not a huge fan of snapshot testing. Yeah, you'd be way better off with visual regression testing. And I do recommend visual regression testing for this type of situation, especially when it's actually pretty low barrier. I think somewhere in here you mentioned that you thought they were brittle. Yeah, snapshots are. Visual regression testing with the modern tools I don't consider to be very brittle. I'm not sure about Chromatic. I haven't looked into it enough, but I know that Applitools is very smart and really good at only breaking when you want it to break. So yeah, that's a couple of the ideas. I would not recommend testing CSS or classes with Jest. Don't bother. If it matters enough to you, just go with visual regression testing. Okay, great. Thanks for the question. A lot of discussion about concurrent mode safe on Twitter. Every other dev. I'd rather hear opinions than do my own research. Nice. Yeah, so do I think concurrent mode will bring loads of bugs? It will not bring loads of bugs if you follow the ESLint rules. It might, it's possible, I suppose, that you could end up with some strange bugs, but really the only time that you'll run into those bugs is when you're breaking the ESLint rules, I think. So Yeah, maybe. There could potentially be situations where I don't think there's an insolent rule against assigning a ref in render, but that can potentially lead to bugs with concurrent mode. So don't do that if you can avoid it. There's like the blessed solution of doing that for lazy initialization, which is fine. And I know that the React team has kind of punted on that. And just the other day, I saw Michael Jackson show a 3-line hook, which is basically like use lazy ref, or I think Ryan may have called it use better ref or something, which basically gives the use state lazy initialization API to use ref. It's really simple. It's like 3 lines. But I'll just show you just for the fun of it. So here's our function use lazy ref, and this is going to be our callback. And here we'll say ref equals react dot use ref, and then if ref current, if not ref current, then ref current equals callback and return ref current, or maybe just the ref, but yeah, I can't remember. I think they returned ref.current. And in that case, it probably should be called use lazy value or something. I don't know. But in any case, I'd probably return the ref. So that way you can modify it later on if you needed to. But yeah, and then you can do stuff like, what is it? Intersection observer, IO ref, intersection observer ref equals use lazy ref, and then new intersection observer. And that way you're not creating a new intersection observer on every render. So anyway, that's like the only other situation that like assigning a ref during render can be a problem, but that one would not be. That one would be fine. So yeah, it's kind of tricky. I think that most of us are building on top of abstractions that will deal with these small, subtle things. And then in our code, we just write code that follows the rules and we'll be fine. So there's that. Okay, Bjorn, I'm not sure how to say that name. I'm sorry. But I thought I saw you on the call, but now you're not. Finished implementing the recoil. Yeah, I remember reading a couple of these questions. So what would be the best workaround to have good performance on both single cell state update and also on a batch cell state update? So let me show us what we're talking about. I think this is exercise 6, maybe. Can't remember for sure. We'll see. Yeah, perf death by 1,000 cats. If we go here, this is use recoil. And yeah, so this, before using recoil, clicking on this triggered a re-render of the whole app because the way that things were managed. So if we look at this, we click on that, and it is really slow. If you, here, let's simulate a slower machine, throttle 6x slowdown, and I click, and it takes forever. But over here, we're using recoil now, 6x slowdown, and I click, and it's basically like no slowdown at all. So recoil solves that for us. But the problem is that with our before, this is still in our exercise, if I click update grid data, here, let's turn on our performance throttling again. So update grid data, it takes forever to update, not a good look. And if we do the same over here, now that's being managed by recoil, you'll notice it actually still is not good. And actually it looks, yeah, it's still bad. So the question was, okay, so how do we make clicking update grid data good? And my assertion would be, you actually probably don't need to worry about it because the example itself is pretty contrived. The example is, let's say that you have some data and you just have a ton of consumers of that data that are like all displaying just a piece of the data. So you've got this like giant array of a ton of stuff. And if all of that updates, it's really difficult to make React render any faster. If it just needs to render, what's 50 times 50, 2,500 cells, and here we're slowing down on 6x. If we up this to like 150 times 100, this is probably going to freeze my computer. It just takes a long time to render that much stuff, and there's not a whole. Yeah, see, we're like toast now. So let's just close this right away. Yeah, so there's a certain point where you're just like React is just rendering too much stuff. And so when you start getting into like visualizations and graphs and stuff like that, that's why things like React 3.js or React 3 Fiber exist, and different abstractions like that to sidestep React, because React isn't fast enough to deal with those types of UIs. So yeah, so there's not really a whole lot that you can do. Luckily, most of us aren't running into these kinds of problems with the business applications we're building or the user apps that we're building. And when we do have things like React 3 Fiber, which would be really cool to add to Epic React eventually, but that may never happen. I have so many other things to add. So yeah, and then as far as using the React DevTools profiler, when you start using Recoil, yeah, because Recoil does its state management outside of React, it doesn't use state and stuff. It's doing different things outside of React. You won't be able to use React DevTools profiler with that. And so from there, it's just using the regular DevTools for that. So yeah, and really that's coming down to like really fine-tuning performance. You wouldn't get a whole lot of value using React DevTools anyway. React DevTools is the profiler for React DevTools is how do I profile the code that I am writing that is using React. So the part of my state management that's using React, I can profile that. But if you're not using React for your state management, then and the abstractions you're using aren't, then you're pretty limited on how useful React DevTools can be for you. So then it's just back to the regular Chrome DevTools profiler. Okay, cool. Let's see, we got 7 minutes. What is your process of going over a new code base to understand it? I feel like I've answered this before somewhere. It may have been on my AMA. Yeah, I can't remember. So I'd give it to you, but I can't remember. Basically, my process for going over a new code base is, I don't know. Like I don't think that I'm super methodical about it. I often will start with the entry point and just see where things go. Just follow it myself. But then I also often, like, you're in there for a purpose. You're not just going on a tour or anything. So like I have the bug that I need to fix or the feature I need to add, and I'll go to the area of the code that deals with that. Running the tests can sometimes be helpful, and like breaking something and seeing which tests fail. Yeah, I don't have tons of advice on that. Sorry. Okay, great. Hello. Okay, what do you think about libraries like Puppeteer? What do you suggest to use normal testing, something like Puppeteer or Breath? Yeah, so Puppeteer is cool and interesting, but I would not use it for testing because I have Cypress, and Cypress is just so good. I don't see any reason to use anything else. So like Puppeteer is, it's limited to just Chrome. And Cypress used to be limited just Chrome. Now it's not. I don't actually care too much about that. But if you don't care about the fact that it's limited to just Chrome, then why would you use Puppeteer? Cypress just has such a better development experience. You can actually like pause at certain points. You can do like really great debug. Yeah, Cypress is just way too good. I would not use Puppeteer for testing. I have used Puppeteer for automation sometimes, but yeah, I wouldn't use it for testing. Okay, one more question about the previous question. Is it better to accessing local storage in the callback function view state instead of callback function of use effect? I mean, this is kind of an interesting thing. The fact that local storage is synchronous, local storage access is synchronous, is actually not a great thing. It really should be asynchronous. And so with that in mind, it probably, especially if you're parsing something or you have lots of components that need to access local storage, then that really could be a bottleneck on the initial mount. Because if you watch the hooks flow video, I show you that lazy initialization is actually called synchronously during render, during the initial mount. It won't be called thereafter, but it will be called synchronously during render. And so if local storage, reading into local storage is slow, then React can't render anything until it finishes reading that, which would not be a great thing. So in that situation, you probably would want to put it in a use effect so that React can finish rendering stuff. And then you can do all your parsing and whatever as the user's looking at what they can see. So yeah, if it's something small like dark mode value in local storage or something like that, then that's fine. I would just do it the way that I show. But if it's something really big and you need to parse a big object or something, you wouldn't want to do that during the initial mount. You probably want to do that in a use effect. So don't want to care about dependent outside the world is yeah, that's actually a fair point. So if you want to be able to switch between local storage and a web API, then what you could do is just make a local storage wrapper that exposes asynchronous access to local storage, and then you just put everything inside of your use effect. Yep, that's totally cool to do that. Okay. One thing to keep in mind, though, is because local storage is local, it's going to be very fast. And so what could happen is you get a flash of loading state where it's like, loading, let's grab the thing from local storage. Now we're not loading anymore. And you just get a flash. Probably not a great experience. So for that situation, some of the videos that I show in the React Suspense workshop will help with that, where you basically just add a CSS transition delay, so that like if it takes 50 milliseconds, for example, that you won't show the loading spinner until after 50 milliseconds, something like that. Okay, Neil is asking a question. Sometimes want to run side effects due to a trigger like a button press rather than due to a state change. Yeah, and you want to put effects in use effect as much as possible. So if you want to refetch some JSON on a button press, yeah, so if you wanted to coordinate that inside of a use effect, and then what you could do, and this is actually starting to get into state machines, so you might look into that. Let's see, blog state machine. Yeah, I've got a couple of blog posts about that, so you can take a look at let's see, yeah, this one. I'll just copy that over here. Yeah, so that will give you a quick intro to state machines. But yeah, so what you could do is when the user clicks the button, you could transition to a state that would basically say, let's start loading. And then I don't know state machines very well. I haven't actually used them. I built a simple state machine library, but yeah, I haven't actually used state machines in production. So I'm limited on how much advice I can give you, but I do know, or how I can tell you how it works. But you could transition into a state whereupon a request is made. And I, from everybody that I know who've used state machines, they say that this is like miraculous and awesome. So this is definitely one area that I'm looking forward to learning more about. And that's what I would investigate if you want to dive in deeper into your question. Yeah, so should we even try? Yeah, I think you should try. If you're just trying to get things shipped, then refetching some JSON on a button press is probably fine. One thing that if I were building this today and I needed to refetch something on a button press, what I would do is I have React Query, and I would React Query will give me a function that I can call to refetch that query data. And so on the button press, I'd just say, hey, React Query, go refetch that thing for me. Yeah, and then I don't need to worry about the use effect. So that works out nicely. And I think React Query may use state machines under the hood by now. It's quite possible. Okay, suggest or give. I'm done with my time, but I can answer the last couple questions. I see people are typing and stuff. So suggest or give any resources handling a dynamic query param. Yeah, so things are interesting when you talk about dynamic query parameters. So often people will try to synchronize their state with the query parameter. So as the state updates, you say use effects and then go update the query parameter and whatnot. I think it actually makes more sense to treat the query parameter as the source of truth, and then your component can react to changes to the query parameter. And so you can probably get some abstractions. I think React Router may have some abstractions for this to just update those values directly. And then your component can react to changes to those values. I'm not sure about that, but I've got to get going here in just a second. So I'll leave you to dive into the details there. But that is something to keep in mind. Yeah. Yay. I'm glad, Jonathan. Thank you for the feedback. And if you want to send that as feedback love, then I'm sure my team would really appreciate it, because I did not build this. But there's the send feedback, and just send them some love. Tell them how awesome they are, and they will appreciate it. If you want to know who's behind all of this, then you can go to credits. These are some legitly awesome people that I'm really grateful I get to work with. Yeah, I want this on a t-shirt. But yeah, really cool people. So yeah. See you in 30 minutes. Oh yeah, that's right. That's what I have to go to next is my live stream on Epic React. Cool. All right. Thanks everybody. Yeah, just to wrap things up, my next office hours is on Thursday. So queue up your questions if you have them. And I'm so far, like, I tried this office hours as kind of an experiment. I'm really happy with the way things are going. And so I do plan on keeping this going for as long as I can. I haven't had to cancel one yet, I don't think. I was like a half hour late on one, kind of forgot. But yeah, things are going pretty well so far. So I'm pretty happy with it. I plan on keeping it going for the foreseeable future. So yeah, go ahead and join us on Thursday. I am going to be doing a live stream all about build an Epic React application. So look forward to that. That's going to be big. And yeah, we'll see you in like a half hour or so if you're going to join us for that. So thanks, everybody. Goodbye.